There's a pot in a small kitchen on the island of Sado, and no one has washed it in 52 years. The woman who owns it, her name is Kimiko, and she learned the craft of miso from her grandmother, who learned it from her own grandmother. In a line that stretches back past any written record into the fog of the Edo period, the pot is a heavy earthenware nabe, dark with the seasoning of decades. And when the steam rises from it, the whole room smells like a memory that has no beginning. If you have ever scraped the bottom of a ceramic pot and paused, wondering whether the brown film that clings to the surface is old meal or new wisdom, you already understand something that modern kitchens have forgotten. The crust on Kimiko's nabe is not dirt. It is the archive of every batch of miso that has ever fermented inside it. The pot does not hold miso. The pot is miso, and the miso is the pot. And the distinction between vessel and contents has blurred into something that science calls lipid polymerization, and grandmothers call love. Miso, the way Kimiko makes it, begins with koji rice and soybeans and salt, and the patience to let them sit for a full cycle of seasons. But the 3-year miso is different. It does not just ferment, it transforms, and the transformation depends entirely on the pot. Every crack in the clay, every pore that has been sealed by decades of microbial activity, every trace of the previous batch that was never scrubbed away, these become the inoculant for the new batch. You are not starting fresh. You are continuing a conversation that began before you were born. This is where the standard story breaks down. The official version, the one you find in glossy cookbooks and television segments, says that miso reaches its peak flavor somewhere between 6 months and 18 months. After that, they tell you, the flavor declines. The enzymes exhaust themselves. The umami fades. But Kimiko's pot holds miso that has been working for 3 years. And the people who taste it describe something that sounds impossible. It is not stronger. It is quieter. It does not shout. It blooms slowly on the tongue, unfolding layer after layer, each one different from the last. If that quiet blooming stirs something in you, if you have ever felt that the best flavors arrive softly on their own time, then let this be your moment to pause. Stay with this channel if you want to keep uncovering the hidden wisdom that ordinary vessels carry, the truths that don't make it into cookbooks because they cannot be measured. And in the comments, tell us about a meal or a moment that unfolded slowly for you. Something that didn't shout but bloomed. What did it taste like? What did it teach you? And here's the beautiful part. Lipid residue analysis, a technique borrowed from archaeology and applied to cooking vessels, has found that the fatty acids embedded in unglazed clay pots undergo a process called polymerization. Over years of repeated heating and cooling, the fats form long molecular chains that create a surface unlike any modern coating. There is nothing non-stick about it. It is the opposite. It is actively sticky, designed to catch and hold flavor molecules so that each meal becomes a continuation of the last. The Japanese kizushi tradition records this exact phenomenon. Kizushi means the scars of use. the patina that develops on a pot that has been lived with. In the old kitchen manuals of Kyoto, there are entire chapters devoted to not washing certain pots. The instruction is specific. Rinse with hot water. Wipe with a bamboo brush. Never use soap, never scrape. The pot must remain alive. The seasoning must remain undisturbed. A professional nabemono chef in Tokyo, one who has cooked the same dish in the same nabe for 37 years, was asked once what his secret was. He said the pot knows the recipe better than he does. He said the pot remembers the temperature of every simmer, the exact moment when the broth shifted from clear to cloudy, the sound of the lid settling when the fire was just right. He said he is merely the assistant. The pot is the chef. So consider what this means for the 3-year miso in Kimiko's kitchen. The pot has been seasoning miso for half a century. Every batch contributes to the next. There is no starting over. There is only continuation. The koji mold spores that land on the fresh soybeans do not encounter a sterile surface. They encounter a surface that already holds the genetic memory of every microbial community that came before. The yeast strains that dominated last year are still present, dormant but ready, waiting for the right conditions to wake up. This is the detail most people miss. The miso is not a single organism. It is a community. And the pot is the territory that community defends. When you wash a pot with soap, you break the territory. You reset the microbial map. The new inhabitants have no memory of what the old inhabitants knew. They start from scratch. And the flavor they produce is shallow because the story has no past. But a pot that has not been washed in 52 years, that pot holds a continuous lineage. The microorganisms that thrive inside it have been selected over generations for their ability to produce the flavor that Kimiko prefers. They have adapted to her kitchen temperature, her humidity, her hand. They know her schedule. When she opens the lid after 3 years, the miso smells like her grandmother's kitchen, which smelled like her great-grandmother's kitchen, which smelled like a kitchen so far back that the only record of it is the taste on the tongue. And there is a scientific name for what Kimiko's pot does. It is called microbial inheritance, and it is the same principle that makes sourdough starters in San Francisco taste different from sourdough starters in Berlin. The microbes are not generic. They are local. They are specific to the walls of the pot, the air of the room, the hands that touch the clay. In Kimiko's kitchen on Sado Island, the air itself carries a population of yeast and bacteria that has evolved in isolation, shaped by the sea salt that blows in from the Japan Sea and the cedar forests that cover the mountains. The Korean Jangdok tradition offers a parallel that deepens the understanding. For centuries, Korean households have fermented soy sauce and gochujang in large earthenware pots called jangdok. And those pots are never washed with detergent. They are rinsed, sun-dried, and returned to their place on the terrace. The older the pot, the more valuable it is, because the pot has absorbed the essence of every batch it has held. In the oral histories collected by fermentation scholars, elderly Korean women describe their jangdok as having a personality. One pot might produce a sweeter soy sauce. Another might produce a more savory one. The women cannot explain why, but they know the difference and they treat each pot accordingly. This is not superstition. It is microbiology expressed through human intuition. The lipid layer inside Kimiko's nabe is not merely a passive coating. It is an active surface that interacts with the miso on a chemical level. The fatty acids that have polymerized over the decades create a matrix that can bind flavor compounds, slowly releasing them back into the new batch. So when Kimiko adds fresh soybeans to the pot, she is not simply filling a container. She is adding ingredients to a living system that already contains the soluble history of every batch that came before. Consider what this does to the 3-year fermentation timeline. In a new pot, the first year is spent building the microbial community. The second year is spent refining it. The third year, the pot and the miso have reached a state of equilibrium. The fermentation slows, but it does not stop. It becomes more deliberate, more precise. The enzymes that once worked quickly now work with patience. The amino acids that create umami have had time to rearrange themselves into complex structures that do not exist in young miso. The flavor is not just deeper, it is more structured. It has architecture. And here's the beautiful part. The pot itself changes during this process. Each batch of miso leaves behind a trace of its own chemistry, and the lipid layer absorbs it. So the pot that Kimiko inherited from her grandmother is not the same pot her grandmother used. It has evolved. It has learned from every batch. The miso that comes out of it today could not have been made 30 years ago, because the pot was a different pot then. It was younger. It knew less. This is the detail that flips the modern kitchen logic on its head. We have been told that cleanliness means sterility, that a clean pot is a blank slate. But what the 3-year miso reveals is that sterility is not a virtue in fermentation. It is a loss. Every time you sterilize a pot, you erase the memory of the previous batch. You force the new microorganisms to start from zero, and they will never catch up to where the old ones were. The flavor will always be shallower, because the story has been interrupted. A chef in Kyoto, who trained under a master of Nabamino, once explained it this way. He said the pot is like a person. When you meet someone for the first time, you do not know their history. You have no context for their behavior. But after 20 years of shared meals and conversations, you begin to understand them without words. You know how they will react before they react. That is what the pot does. It learns the rhythm of the cook. That idea that a pot learns your rhythm is something you can carry with you into your own kitchen. If it resonates, come back for the next chapter, where we will meet another vessel that remembers more than you would expect. And leave a word in the comments. Tell us about one thing in your kitchen. A pot, a pan, a knife that seems to know you, that has learned your rhythm over years of use. What does it do that surprises you? So when Kimiko opens the lid after 3 years, and the miso releases that smell that carries the echo of her grandmother's kitchen, what she is experiencing is not nostalgia. It is continuity. The molecular structure of the miso contains the memory of the old miso, which contained the memory of the older miso, and so on back through the decades. The pot is a time capsule that is still alive, still fermenting, still writing its story. And Kimiko knows that when she passes the pot to her granddaughter, she will pass not just a vessel, but a voice that has been speaking for more than a century. And this is where the story turns back to you, standing in your own kitchen, holding a pot that might have a story of its own. If you have ever hesitated before scrubbing a stubborn stain, if you have ever felt a quiet resistance when the sponge touched a seasoned surface, you already know what Kimiko knows. That hesitation is not laziness. It is instinct. It is the part of you that understands, without being taught, that some things are not meant to be erased. The modern world tells you that a clean pot is a good pot, that bacteria are enemies, that the only acceptable surface is a sterile one. But the 3-year miso in a 52-year-old pot tells a different truth. It says that the invisible world is not a battle. It is a partnership. The microorganisms that live in the clay are not invaders. They are co-creators. They have been working alongside human hands for 10,000 years. And they have never needed an insurance policy. So the next time you lift the lid of a pot that has seen a few seasons, pay attention to what rises with the steam. It is not just aroma. It is the distillation of every meal that pot has ever held. It is the ghost of every onion that was caramelized in that vessel. Every broth that simmered through the night. Every hand that stirred and tasted and adjusted and remembered. The pot has been listening. Now it is speaking back. Kimiko's miso will be ready in 3 years. And when she opens that lid, she will not be tasting a recipe. She will be tasting a continuous thread that runs through 8 generations of women, through war and peace and famine and feast, through pots that were never washed and flavors that were never forgotten. The miso does not end with her. It continues, and if you listen carefully, you might hear your own grandmother whispering from the bottom of a pot you thought was empty. That film at the bottom is not grime. It is her voice, still simmering,